Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream on this really hot and warm Sunday evening. Some cool train running and a little presentation for the use of the Wagenliste and the Bremszettel that TSG was nice enough to include in the Baureihe 145 expert locomotive. Aqua subscribed to tier 2. They subscribed for 12 months. Moin Aqua, thank you so much for your ongoing support and for taking part in this stream tonight. Let me turn on the disclaimer. As always, I got the DLCs, most of them at any rate, on Steam here for free from DTG for being an ambassador, and this does not mean that I am talking the company line, but you will get unfiltered opinion from me as always. The Pfälzische Ludwigsbahn Mannheim to Kaiserslautern was fixed in a certain way. Spectre will be happy because now we can actually go through the tunnel between Hochspeyer and Frankenstein without being blinded by this one piece of tunnel architecture that was so bright even at night that you thought you were entering some wormhole or something. Well, no way, the CD Raider, that it was fixed. Yeah, it was. It's not only in the update changelog, but I've already seen it. Seen it work. So, why the Baureihe 145? Because it is a really, really cute loco, and because it was released at the beginning of a month with an endless number of releases. I was a bit, well, little time that could be allocated to the 145, and one feature especially that I want to talk about today. But just look on how many different routes this loco, the 145, actually layers. It layers to Schnellfahrstrecke Kassel-Würzburg, it layers to Bremen-Oldenburg, to Leipzig-Dresden, to Salzburg-Rosenheim, to Stuttgart-Heilbronn, Frankfurt-Fulda, S-Bahn Frankfurt, Hauptstrecke Hamburg-Lübeck, München-Augsburg, Rhein-Ruhr, Mannheim-Kaiserslautern, Main-Spessart-Bahn, Nahverkehr Dresden, weil er ist more or less Dresden-Leipzig, Rhein-Ruhr-Osten, Ruhr-Sieg-Nord, all the three Ruhr, DLC is Schnellfahrstrecke Köln, and Dresden-Chemnitz, the Taranta ramp. So actually a lot of different routes, and you can drive with the expert locomotive and enjoy the benefits of driving the expert locomotive, like especially the evolved fault system that is in no way to be compared with the general fault system in the game that is well, a bit basic compared to the fault system that runs on the expert locomotives. And yeah, the train data input is another thing that you always have to keep in mind when running the expert locomotives in the timetable run. And this is what we're going to do today. And to make it easier or faster, and you don't have to run around your cars and do a lot of Excel calculations, you get a Wagenliste and a Bremszettel. And I show you how to use them. You already know that, I'm sure, but it can never hurt to look at it properly. So let's start the service, and I actually prepared service marker for that. Mannheim Kaiserslautern has a lot of cars, so auto rack trains with cars, so-called L-Wagen. Barcelona, we're actually coming from Barcelona and we are going to Mannheim. And we're starting at Hochspeyer, not at Kaiserslautern, so that we can see the tunnel right away. And when we start in our expert locomotive, then we find those two documents, the Wagenliste and the Bremszettel, with a lot of cryptic numbers and things, and well, we can't just start the train as usual because the train does not have train data inside. So this is what we have to do. Lights is always the easy one. The next question is already to what brake mode do we set our brake selector? R probably not, because we have freight train, but do we put it to G or do we put it to P? You remember I made 1 or 2 videos about this. It depends on how long your train is, but mainly how heavy the consist is that you're carrying about. And this is how you can find out where to put your brake selector in. And that was always a bit of a calculation. You had to look into the overview, how long and how heavy your train is, and then you had to subtract the locomotive. Theodoros, very nice to see you. Hello Tiger and all, very long time no see. I hope it is not too late at your place already, and you can enjoy the stream and the calculations. I have a presentation for how to read and how to implement this. Yeah, the first thing that we find out is how to set our brakes. We look at the weight of our consist, that is the Wagenzug, the train without, and now we find the number here already calculated, 800, and 800 is exactly the threshold that still allows it to run our locomotive in P. Juniper! And you are now called June Striker. That's nice. Nice to have you here. Yeah, that is one thing, so our locomotive can stay in P. I hope all the cars are set to P as well. How can we find out what the cars are set to? Well, we have to find the levers on the cars and look what they are set to. And actually, they are set to P on the first car. And if the first car is set to P, then if everything works normally, no car can set to G after the first car is set to P. And if we look at this list, actually all the cars are set to P because the brake weight is inserted into the column for brake mode P. Not G, not R in white, not R in the diamond in red, not R plus MG. This is only for passenger trains, not for freight trains, obviously. Good. Well, what do we do with our train data? First, this thing tells us that the cap is not activated. Kein Führerstand besetzt. How can we fix this? Not by putting the contrast to dark, what is always a good thing to do. Simply by putting the reverser handle in and selecting one direction. And then we can, if we want, because we're just starting here, run the PCB LZB test. The problem is it will drain the brake pipe. It will take forever to release the brakes before we can start. Now this is happening here. The 55 indicator for the PCB U mode is flashing, and the Prüfstör, that is the well, fault indicator for a lot of things connected with this board here, are flashing. And they are flashing because we have no valid train data. So if you see this indication, 55 flashing and the fault indicator flashing, then typically you don't have train data. How do we insert the train data? We need that thing again. We have put our reverse into forward, and then we need this Zug BC, what is more or less the dispatching system and all what is connected. And here the train shows you with what values for the train data it is working at the moment. And those are the so-called basic data, the data that the train is using if the train does not have better information, right? So we give him better information, and for that it is ZDE for Zugdateneingabe, for train data input. And when we select this and have actually our reverse and forward, then we can with those keys punch in better numbers, better train data. But how do we do that? And we have a video about train data input. We need to punch in the values for the brake setting, as we have P brakes, we set 4 for Bremshundertstel. Now we can actually calculate. You remember that we ran up and down the train and added the weight of the cars and the brake weight, and now we can actually look in our Bremszettel, and here the calculations have already been made. The mass of the whole train, the brake weight of the whole train, and the Bremshundertstel, vorhandene Bremshundertstel, the brake percentage, has already been calculated, and it is 101. With this value we can look into our Einstelltabelle and read it. 101 gives us 100 that we have to punch in at this point. And so we can punch in 100 here. And CD Radar says, I like how the screen shows you that the number on the button is the same as the button number. Yeah, I would do it randomly to make it more interesting. Yes. And changing always a little time before the driver's finger hits the button, right? Anyway, it is challenging enough. ZL means Zuglänge, length of train. And again, we don't need to calculate, we don't need to look into our overview. We find that value here in the brake sheet. Länge, length, and here we have 515 for the whole train. That allows us, we have to round it up to the next 10 meters to punch in 520, and then our VMZ, that is the maximum authorized speed for the train. Again, we can look in our brake sheet. We see that the Fahrplangeschwindigkeit, the timetable speed, is 100, and that no vehicle in our train slows us down below the 100. No, no, no. And we have the Bremshundertstel that we need. Mindestbremshundertstel are 64. The minimum brake percentage, we surpass that easily. So we stick with the timetable speed and insert the 100 here. Now we have our train data. We can confirm it. Now we can see that it is in the upper row as well. And we confirm it a second time. And now it tells us Wachsamkeitstaste erwartet. This is the PZB acknowledge key here. And the train wants you to acknowledge it. And now the train data is put in properly. If we look into Zugdateneingabe again, or even the one before, Zugbesi, we are now running 4, 100, 520, and 100. And Theodoros asks, what is BRA again? This is the brake mode in a coded number. You can see it in this table here. This little one. This is the value that you have to put in for BRA. On a freight train, if you have P brakes in your train, at least one on the loco, or at least one on the 6+ cars. If you run LL formation, then 4. If you run a full G train, then 2. And if you're running a passenger train with R settings or even with P settings, you punch in 9. That is for BRA. So typically passenger trains you put in 9. For freight trains, the slow ones, the super slow ones that run completely in G, a 2, and for all other freight trains a 4. that is not super intuitive, but also not too complex to remember. So, one more thing that we don't need to put in, but can put in. At the moment, we are at Zug train number 0, according to the data, but actually our train number is 49255. It also says here 49255, and this is repeated here, 49255. And where does this belong to? There is an input for Zug Fahrzeugführernummer, that is train/driver number. And so the number that we read here, 49255, it is 49255. Don't forget to put the 0, and then for the driver number you can take whatever you want, that is ad lib, and then confirm, and then you have a train number. June Striker subscribed at tier 1. They've subscribed for 12 months and currently on an 11-month streak. Happy that you are still here teaching us trains a year later. Thank you so much, Juniper, for subscribing again. It's great to have you guys on the stream. The train number, while we're at it, also goes into the GSMR. Zugdaten, train data. And here's not much more to put in because DB cargo is already correct and the other stuff is also correct. ZN for Zugnummer, train number, and here the 49255 goes in as well, so that the GSMR radio knows who we are. And we still have to register, anmelden. Zugdaten werden angemeldet. Anmeldung ist erfolgt. Now we are actually logged in. We have our train number here. Those things don't flash anymore. And the GSMR, the indestructible GSMR, will guide us through live. And the train stopped this flashing 55 and the flashing warning indicator. Puts a steadily lit 70 indicator to show us that we're running in PZB mode M. And how does the train know that? We did not really put any value in for PZB mode. This is something that the train calculates by himself from those values that we gave him, with the Bremshundertstelwert and the Brems brake mode Wert. And then the train can calculate that and shows you the result by lighting the indicator in question. So that is what is specific to the expert locomotives, and it is very nice that you have the relevant numbers, the consist weight, the train length, the Fahrplangeschwindigkeit, all in one sheet, and you also can see whether your cars are set to P or G, or at least are supposed to be set to P and G, and can still look it up if it actually is so. Because typically, as the driver of a freight train, you're also the, well, main conductor, or if you want to call it, the Zugchef, and then it is your responsibility to provide a proper Wagenliste and a proper break sheet. At any rate, this is the status at the time of about 2010, 2011. By now you can find a lot of apps that calculate break sheets. You can use programs on your table, and you have predefined break sheets for trains that always run in the same formation and stuff like this. But the classic situation would be those handwritten sheets that are filled in. First, the wagon list. Actually, you would walk along your train, put in the numbers and do all the calculations, and based on those data plus some more data from the timetable, you would calculate all those values in the Bremszettel. And then you're actually good and can run. And on this locomotive, providing those two documents actually makes it a lot easier to punch in the train data. And at the yeah, as a side effect, you can see what the game actually thinks that the values are for the cars that you're running. And it is actually an interesting thing to check whether the locomotive gets all the numbers right for all the unlimited numbers of different freight cars and versions that are in the games in different DLCs. And Theodore, that document's already given to us. That's neat. Yes, in this locomotive, the Expert 145, they are given to us. In real life, it would be normally your responsibility to create them. And then they are on the train, and yeah, everyone who has something to do with the train actually knows what the values here are good for. So we're running our train in P. We have put in the train data. We can start. We have already a signal. Also, the Fahrdienstleiter tells us proceed as the signals indicate. We can start with 60. But before we can start, we actually have to release our brakes. Releasing the brakes on a freight train is always a thing that takes some time. Typically, you would also use the Angleicher to overcharge the brake pipe a bit so that all the brakes are at the same page with their reactiveness and that the brakes are releasing properly. I'm applying the loco brake here to hold this in place. By the way, I like this livery for the RBH, the blue one. For a change, not a red box, but a blue and white box. That is super neat. And we're carrying, as I already said, a full train of loaded auto carrier cars. L-Wagen. We have signs at the end of our train, and why are they called L-Wagen? Because typically freight cars in UIC country, and that includes Germany, has those coded names for the wagons, and the first letter typically gives you what kind of a wagon it is. So L cars are typically cars to transport automobiles. Z cars are those tanker cars for fluids and gases. S cars are the flatbed ones for the intermodal trains, for example. And there are H cars that are box cars, more or less like the Habines. K cars are there. T cars for ore and stuff like this. Aggregates that you pour in from the top and that you can throw out through the bottom, for example. And then the letters after this give you more information about what those cars can do and how they behave and what stuff is installed in them. I'm telling you this to hold us in time. Be careful not to move into the past. This is what I said for the loco brake. To hold us in place was maybe the idea before my mind went somewhere else. So actually I told you this so that the train brakes can release properly, and then we finally want to see if our train starts. Can actually lock and unlock the window. I haven't seen this before. Look. And then you can open it. You cannot open it without unlocking it first. Nice. This loco has a door control. You can also find the NV variant, that is for Nahverkehr, commuter traffic version that can control doors. But I have not seen any services in the timetables where the 145 can be used for passenger trains. Would be interesting to see, because there are some special things that can that are only apply to passenger trains, Reisezüge. Well, we will still have to see. Now let's see if we can set this train in motion. We still hear the brakes a bit. One thing though, pantograph, cars. It is true that most of the time you would use the rear pantograph if you have to. But one exception for this, according to my humble knowledge, would be tank cars and auto-rack cars, because what you don't want is that sparks from the pantograph fall on the cars and destroy them, burn the windscreens and stuff like this. So that means that probably you would use the other pantograph. Can always try to change it on the fly. Lowering worked already. Then we quickly need to jump back and change the pantograph to front. Sit down before the CFA kicks in. See if we can get it up again. Now we have it up. But now the main circuit breaker is open. It is closed. Traktionssperre is released. Well, then why didn't you switch it, he asks me. Good question. To show you that it can be done on the fly. And now the tunnel. Not this one, but the next one. We made it across the switch. That means we can accelerate beyond the 60. That is at the moment 100. Line speed equals timetable speed. Signal for the level crossing, by the way, is also flashing now, this one. Now it is not flashing because we're not coming this way, but if you're driving in the opposite direction and you're approaching this level crossing, it was always an annoyance that the signal did not flash, and what meant that if you behaved correctly then you would have to stop in front of the level crossing. But now it is flashing from what I've seen. So, why am I not accelerating beyond the 95? Because soon enough we will run into a speed limit of 80. And when we're passing the advanced warning sign, the ZS3V, traveling faster than 95, we would have to go through 1000 Hertz monitoring. Here's the 80 sign. And if we're not traveling faster than 95, then we don't need to slow down to 65, at least below the 70, to comply with the PZB. But we can just slowly slow down to 80. By the way, what happened to the scenario indicator? It vanished. We're going straight through to Mannheim anyway, so we don't really need it. And did you realize? Oh no! It has not been fixed after all. What is the problem? The last 3 runs that I did, it was fixed. And now it is back again. Weird. So why is the slowdown to 80 shown twice? I think this is because you have a stopping point in between. That means that you might have forgotten it. When you stop at the platform, maybe you are held for some time and then start again. It's also a thing that happens in British operating rules for temporary speed restrictions. The advanced warning sign for the slowdown needs to be repeated. They're in connection with a yellow sign showing the letter R if the train stops in between. So that was the proof of the pudding gone wrong. Heroes are right, that's where Epula can also help. Yes, true. You're not using third-party Epula anymore. Oh, I'm using it sometimes. On the streams, I will use it again. Preparing some freight runs on Schnellfahrstrecke Kassel-Würzburg with it. But today I wanted to focus on something else. But I will bring it back. Oh no, I accelerated too early. The increase to 100 just starts here. Here slow down to 90 indicated, since we're not faster than 105. We don't need to comply with 1000 Hertz. A neat program, that thing is, yes. It is actually neat. It is, I have to admit it, when I'm streaming, it is a bit in the way of all things. Because I have the OBS, I have the chat, I have all the other things, the presentation, the game running in the background, so one more thing. If you can do without it, sometimes helps. CD radar, is the speed 105 always at 1000 Hertz? Or how does PCB know that it is at the given speed if it is always 1000 Hertz? No, it is only for increase for speed limits of 80 and 90. And for 80 it is 95, and for 90 it is 105. It's always 15 kilometers above. And the system knows that because at those signs and signals you have an installation like a GPA, a Geschwindigkeitsprüfabschnitt. Those magnets that sometimes check your speed if the slowdown is in the reach of 100 and above, where you don't get 1000 Hertz monitoring for them. So the same technology with one magnet switching on a timer. If the timer has elapsed before you hit the 2000 Hertz magnet, nothing happens. If the timer is still running because you are so fast and then hit the 2000 Hertz magnet, then you get a penalty break. And those installations, you can actually see them in the game because you have like 3 magnets around those signs. And this is only for slow down to 80 and slow down to 90. Slow down to 100 and more, you don't have 1000 Hertz. Slow down to 70 and less, you always have 1000 Hertz, regardless how fast you're traveling. So especially for the 80 limits and 90 limits in a PZBM train and a PZBU train, this can be sometimes essential, because if you have to slow down from 100 to 80 in a PZBU train and you have to go below the 55 or even 50 if you play correctly, then this is super annoying. So you would just try not to be faster than the 95 when you hit the advanced warning sign. Lamprecht, what is this station called here? We're almost at Neustadt an der Weinstraße. And I think when we're past Neustadt and going into the fast track, then we can hear the presentation. Here is actually no magnet at all, because no train can go faster than 100 here, line speed. So no train can be faster than 105, so there is no need to check for any speed. You just have to rely on the drivers to slow down in time. Juniper, I was in the Neustadt and the Weinstraße 3 weeks ago when it was so hot, and there are nice hills for walking. Did you have a look at that railway museum that is at Neustadt an der Weinstraße? Because when I traveled through Neustadt an der Weinstraße last year, I did only see one historic train just coming out of the museum. But unfortunately I did not have the time to look at it properly. I didn't go inside, but I looked like not too much from the outside. Well, the train that came out of it was really cool. If it is their only train, I can't tell you. So, now we have our 1000 Hertz for this KS2 signal. Slowing down below the 65 according to a brake curve. Then in case we hit the 500 Hertz, we mustn't be faster than 45. And in the end, we would have to be not faster than 30 after the 153 meters behind the 500 Hertz magnet. Can we already see how our signal cleared? The yellow lamp is off, the 70 is still flashing. That means we can release, since proceed aspect faster than 30 and no further influencing, be it 1000 Hertz or 500 Hertz. By the way, I found out on the last time I played SimRail that the brake releaser works when the train brake is not yet fully charged and we want to start applying power. Oh yeah, that sometimes works. Depends on the locomotive what a brake releaser actually does. Sometimes overcharging the brakes at this point works. If you overdo it, you might end up with a totally overcharged brake system. So, and while we are accelerating again to timetable speed of 100, I bring on the presentation. It is a bit the same that we talked about in the beginning, but in more detail and more systematically approached. So I think that should be Well, I was looking for presentation. Here we are. German operating rules, Wagenliste. What is the German word for Wagenlist? And Bremszettel. What is the German word for brake sheet? Let's see what we have. Those two documents on our table. The left one, the Wagenliste, the Wagenlist. What do we have? We have a header that gives us the date of when we are running the train, our train number, and our own name, Joe Lorry. So that would be me as driver at the same time Zugführer. So I'm the one responsible for filling this out. And see, the radar says, oh, the brake release is used when you want to disconnect the locomotive from the wagons and you want to press the buffers a little. So you brake the whole train and then use the button to release the brakes only on the locomotive, and you can push on. That would be like bailing off on the American trains, right? And on the independent brake handle. If you want to check it out and read in more detail, I did not get a current copy of this sheet and the internal documents that the Deutsche Bahn is using. The best that I could get was a version from 2011 of this directive here, but this is just as well since our train is running around that time, so it all makes a lot of sense. So what is actually this body of numbers here good for? On the left side, under the train number that we already used to put it into our GSMR and into the train computer, we get the wagon numbers of every vehicle that we are pulling around. So we already have talked about this EVN, this European vehicle number, that tells us from what country it is, who it belongs to, what type of car it is, and so on. I don't want to go into any more detail at this point, but you can identify what vehicles there are behind you. Sometimes you have to check that this is actually true and that you don't have a different train than everybody thinks that you have, and then you have to compare the numbers if that is actually what you're carrying around. Does not give us super much information in the simulation, but still. Then here in this column, number 2, you would have the letters indicating what type of car you're running around. And those are the first letters of the names of the cars, like Lars and Thackens and Rabins and whatever. And L is for Autorack cars, as mentioned. And so you can actually see, without looking out of the window and walking along your train, what you are supposed to be running around. In the simulation, in real life, you would have probably have inserted it yourself by walking along the train. Then you know, do you have autoracks? Is there still a tank car at the end of the train or whatever? The next two columns, 3A and 3B, give you an indication of how many axles those wagons have and how many of them are loaded and how many of them are empty. So in the simulation, we can pretty nicely see whether we are carrying loaded wagons or empty wagons. For empty wagons, we would have the numbers here in that column. For loaded wagons, we have the numbers here. And we can also see how many axles there are in the cars. And those cars typically have 4. They count as the pairs for the Lars count as one vehicle. And they have 4 single axles, so wheel sets, no bogies, but those wheel sets here. And you can see yours. Very nice to see you. Good evening to you. In column 4, you can see how long those vehicles are, rounded to the next 10 tenths of a meter. So those are meters, and this is 1/10 of a meter. So we don't want every centimeter, but every decimeter, and for the wagon length. And if you add this up, then the sum of this column here gives you the consist length, the length of the train without the working locomotives. What is the consist? The Wagenzug, as they say in German. Next column, 5A and 5B, give you on the left the load. So Gewicht it says, it's actually probably more proper to call it the mass of your load, of your cargo. And the other column gives you the gross mass or weight of the wagon in question. So if you want to know the tare weight or mass, so that is the car without the load, you have to subtract the left column from the right. So we know we have a cargo of 20 tons in those wagons. Those cars together weigh about 20 tons, and the whole car weighs 50, and then we have 30 tons for the empty vehicle. Column 6 is very interesting because you can see the braked weight and at the same time the brake setting. Yeah, of course, if you add the right column 5B, then you get the consist mass, so the weight or mass of your cars without the locomotive. Then mass we need, and we need the brake weight to calculate the Bremshundertstel and all that stuff. We have many videos about how to calculate the Bremshundertstel and how to use it. Those two things, weight of the cars and the brake weight. And this typically is written on the cars. There are a lot of rules how they how this must be modified and stuff in certain conditions. But here we can especially see what brake setting those cars are set to G or P in our freight trains typically. And I've already seen that this sheet also can work properly on a long loco formation. That means a train where you have to put the first 5 vehicles or even 6 if you have connected pairs like those to G. That would be then 3 vehicles because the pair counts as one vehicle, and then the rest to P. Then you have the weight written into the G column for the first 5 vehicles, and then the rest you have the brake weight written into the P column. So you see already what is the most efficient brake setting in the contents. Chalori is there by the game. That's amazing. Yes, he is. He is. Yeah, if you add this up, all the entries in all the columns, then you have the consist braked weight. Das Bremsgewicht vom Wagenzug, die Masse des Wagenzugs divided, and you get the Bremshundertstel. If you happen, and this is an interesting thing that I stumbled over when I was reading this directive, if you have the brake weight underlined, then this indicates that this specific vehicle has a single release brake. We might have talked about the difference between single release and gradual release on brake valves that those cars can have, and the difference is on a single release brake valve, as soon as you start releasing the brakes, you release them completely. You cannot stop the releasing again, and that also means that it takes some time until you can reapply the brakes. With gradual release, what is typically what we would use on modern trains, we can apply the brakes a bit, release them a bit, apply them again, release them a bit in grades. And to know that you have vehicles that would only have single release brakes, they would be underlined. If you want to see some single release brakes, then you can run American trains, Sandpatch Grade. Those are typical single release brakes. And in German trains with the Deutsche Krokodil DLC, the Thunderboxes, the Donnerbüchsen, the green old rail cars that come with it, I think they are single release. It's typically not a thing that is decided on the locomotive, but on every vehicle what kind of control valve they have for their brakes. So underlined would mean single release. And here in the Bemerkungen, what is a bit of a catch-all column, you would put in specifics about the vehicle. If you have tank cars, typically you put in what kind of stuff you're carrying around, if it is dangerous, and you put in the codes that are also shown on those orange plates that are typically connected to those tank cars and stuff. What we see here, this H in brackets tell us that those cars have a Feststellbremse, according to this directive that I have read here. If you have a consist with cars that go different ways, so that you have to put some cars in a different station than others, then you can also read it here in a starting station and target station. For example, this column 7 is for passenger cars, coaches. You have to put in the numbers to describe them. All right. So with this thing, the wagon list, you know what you are carrying around, and you can calculate the consist length, consist mass, and consist brake weight by adding up the values that you have there. And from those values, you can then fill out your brake sheet, at least parts of it. Brake sheet, Bremszettel, that calculates more or less whether we can go full Fahrplangeschwindigkeit, whether we have to slow down, and that we have that we comply with the requirements for the brake percentage on this piece of track that we are running on. So also here, this is where I read it up if you want to read the directive for yourself. Again, we find the train number, so that we know we're talking about the same train. And then here in row 1, you have the mass. And then 3 columns. The first one is always the consist, like here. Those are the cars without the working locos. And here we can already put the sum of the consist mass into that space here. And this is 800. You don't even have to do the adding up yourself. The game is giving you the figure here. And this was relevant for the brake setting on the loco, as we did in the beginning. And the second column is the working locos, or the loco if you only have one, with its mass. And then you add it up simply, and then you get the mass for the train. So this is the principle: cars without locos, working locos, whole train. This happens for the mass, and this is what we get here. And from here we can derive the loco brake setting. Up to 800, the loco can typically run in P. Beyond 800, the loco needs to run in G. That is the simple rule. If you have to put more cars into G as well, is a second thing that is more complicated. Up to 1200 tons, it is typically enough that the loco runs in G and the cars run in P. Beyond the 1200 up to 1600, you can run a long loco formation. That means the loco in G and the first 5 vehicles in G, the rest in P. And beyond that, it can happen that you have to run the whole train in G unless set of more complicated provisions are fulfilled. So if you look into this field here, you can already see, can I run my loco in G or in P? If the train is set up properly, then you can stop thinking at this point. Just up to 800 tons, put the loco brakes in P, and if it is more than 800, put the loco brakes in G, if the game has not done that for you. At the same time, we can compare it with the most efficient brake setting in the consist and determine, of course, I failed the copy paste at this point, in terrain. Terrain, let's just fix it before we go on. Also on the slides that come after, so a little view behind the scenes. Most efficient brake setting in train. Typically, you don't have a more efficient brake setting on the loco than on the cars. So typically, if you have a P car, then it is P. And if you don't have a P car, then also your loco will run in G. And then C is the a G is the most efficient brake setting in your train, right? So, and this was relevant, Theodorus, for the BRA entry in the train data. Next thing, braked weight is the next row, and we can get it, summing it up here, putting in here, adding the brake weight of the locomotive, ending up with the brake weight for the whole train. Why is the number here the same? Brake weight and mass for the consist is the same. This typically happen. City Radar says that feeling when you became a driver to avoid paperwork. Yes, this is why they are handing out apps now for it. So you can do it guided by an app or even by AI. But typically it would be paperwork. Why is it the same number? Is that just coincidence? Typically not. If you have only cars that have an automatic load change, that means a contraption that adjusts the brake weight to the mass of your load of your cargo, then you typically end up with brake weight equals weight or mass of the vehicles, with ending up for those vehicles brake percentage of 100. So this is why it is no surprise that the mass of our L cars is the same as the brake weight. Our loco has a bit more brake weight than it is actually Dienstgewicht, so that we are actually improving our brake percentage a bit with the locomotive. If we add up all the weight, if we add up all the brake weight and divide the brake weight by the mass, as it says here in this formula, multiplied by 100, rounded down, we end up with the relevant brake percentage. As I said, because of the automatic load change, the consist has brake percentage of 100%, while as the loco has a brake percentage of above 100%, and this ends up in a slightly better brake percentage than 100%. 101. Still not the greatest brake percentage, but we can work with it. Especially since the Bremshundertstel, where we got them from, we will see on the next slide, are only 64. So we have enough brake percentage to make full use of the timetable speed. What's the next thing that we can use? The consist length goes into this column here. Consist length plus loco length ends up with the train length, and the train length we need for not only for our road runner, but especially for our train data input. The other stuff in between, you can see in row 7, you repeat the last vehicle in your consist so that you know what is the number of the last vehicle. Last vehicle is always important, because if the last vehicle is missing, then something bad had happened. And you usually don't lose any vehicles in between, but if you lose something, then the last vehicle is among the lost vehicles. 8 and 9 tells you again the single release and gradual release, einlösige Bremsen, mehrlösige Bremsen, because nothing is underlined. This was just an example here. In our documents, we have no single release brakes. All the brakes in all 16 cars that we have are gradual release. 10 and 11 tells you whether you have disc brakes. This would be the D in the circle, or brakes with special kinds of brake pads. The L and LL ones are typically not as loud as the other ones, and all our brakes are using those brake pads of that kind. Matrosoft Bremsen is a special kind of braking system. If you want to know more about the Matrosoft Bremsen, go to Jörg Hase and his The Silberling canal. He has some recent videos discussing the Matrosoft Bremsen in great lengths. It's some stuff from Eastern Germany especially. What does not work in the sheets that we got with the game is the number of the gebremsten Achsen, of the axles that are actually braked, because typically all our axles that we have in the cars are braked, with modern cars. It says 0, what is obviously not true. And you have to take this into your form, because there is typically a requirement that at least 90% of your axles in the train need to be braked, so that the brakes are working on at least 90% of the axles in your train, and then you can calculate that here. Zahl der Achsen, you have that here from the consist from your loco. So 86 and 90% of 68, obviously. 90% of the 68 need to be braked, and this does obviously not work in the sheet here. 0 and 0 are not plausible numbers. Zulässige Geschwindigkeit niedriger als die des Zuges gemäß Fahrplanangaben. For that you need to know what is the timetable speed. And then you can see if you have vehicles that cannot go timetable speed for whatever reason, because they are too heavily loaded, or because of the way they are built, they can't go as fast as the timetable speed allows. And then you either mark yes or no and punch in how fast they can go. And every time you see this asterisk here, then you have to call the betriebsleitende Stelle. That is typically not the dispatcher, signaler, or Fahrdienstleiter, but the Betriebsleitung, so the supervisor, the higher up thingy. And then they have to figure out what to do, typically impose some speed restrictions on it, or if they let you go already. So the only thing that we don't know from our train data, because you can see the BRA value can be derived from the most efficient brake setting in the train, GOP, so either 2 or 4. On passenger trains 9. The brake percentage we find here, the length we find here, the VMZ, so the maximum authorized speed, we don't know yet. We need that from the timetable speed, because VMZ can never be faster than timetable speed, can only be slower if we have vehicles that can't go timetable speed, and if we don't achieve enough brake percentage. So where and how do we get those numbers? How do we get the minimum brake percentage? How do we get the timetable speed? Well, we get it from a timetable, right? Here, the timetable speed. Also, then we can compare whether we have vehicles that can't go timetable speed. And for that, we need a timetable. For example, a Buchfahrplan here. Geschwindigkeitsheft, you know that. I have shown you this nice thingies that Open-Minded made in connection with my own calculator for the brake percentage at the time. And here in the header, you typically have two things given. The one thing is for what speed this timetable is set out for, and how many brake percentage clicks, how many Bremshundertstel, what kind of brake percentage you need to actually run this speed. This here is taken from this directive here, downloaded from the DB Infrago. And this timetable here would give you 100 kilometers per hour, and that can be put in here so that you know what to compare you with. And then you check out your vehicles, and all your vehicles can go at least 100, and then you can mark no. So there is no vehicle that cannot go Fahrplangeschwindigkeit in our consist. How do you know whether the trains, whether the vehicles can go that speed? Typically, it is written on their sides. There is this Lastgrenzenraster, and those markings that we would have to look at in a different video. Also the stars behind it, but typically most of the freight cars that are used in the game on German lines can go at least 100, some can go 120, and that is the typical thing, 100 or 120. I've not seen any that are supposed to go slower, and also no freight cars that can go faster than 120. What does not really help, because the legal maximum for freight trains in Germany is 120, so there is no big use if the cars can go faster, if they're not allowed to, outside of experimental things, right? The next thing, the Minimum required Bremshundertstel, you get it from here. And this gives you this value, and you compare your brake percentage of your train with the minimum required brake percentage. In case you don't achieve that, in case your train has less than the minimum brake percentage, then you cannot run the timetable speed that this timetable is set out for. And what do? Then you have to apply the asterisk and call the old man and ask what you're supposed to do. Yeah, so now we have everything that we need for punching in train data and the train number. And where does it go? We have done this in the beginning of the game. We need BRA, BRH, ZL, and VMZ. You find this in the Zugwesi under ZDI, Zugdateneingabe, Train Data Input. Most efficient brake setting in the train. Typically, do you have P or cars in your train, or is everything including the loco set to G? So you would have to put in either 2 or 4. And because we have found we have P cars in the train, actually also the loco, everything is just like that, still put to P. And then we have to look into this table, as I showed in the beginning here, this little one on freight trains, G or P, then 2 or 4. And for us, we had P cars. And so we punch in a 4 here. See the radar. What is the difference of Stelle and Leitstelle? Not every Stelle is a Leitstelle. So there can be a Stelle is more or less an institution, an agency, some office where something is done, and a Leitstelle is an office where things are conducted, yeah, where they are organized, managed, conducted. And here in this context, for Germany, it also says Stelle, because the leitende, so the conducting element is already in this adjective, betriebsleitende Stelle. It can also be put as Betriebsleitstelle, if you want to put it like this. Okay, BRA, we get it, especially from the wagon list. Is there P? Then 4. Is there no P? Then 2. Brake percentage, we cannot put the 101 in here because we don't put in single digit numbers, only the first 2 digits of a 3-digit number. And for that, we have this conversion table typically pinned to the back of our cap. And here we look it up. We have 101. This gives us this row, and this tells us to punch in 100. It is not simply rounding up and down. You can see it is sometimes a bit different. With 144, you would put in 130. This is a thing that is sometimes a bit arcane, but what depends on how the locomotive is built exactly and experimental values, and then this is the best what should be used. So in our case, 101 real brake percentage translates in 100 BRH value. So we put in 100. Yeah, ZL for the length of the train. We can get this directly from here without having to resort to this table. We just have to round it up to the next 10 meters. So this is why we end up with 520. The VMZ, I told you, it is the timetable speed unless we have slower vehicles in the car, in the train. But all our vehicles can go at least 100. And also the Mindestbremshundertstel do not slow us down even more. So we punch in the timetable speed of 100 here. Also, another restricting factor for the VMZ that we have to punch in can come from this table here. Depending on our brake percentage, we can have a limited value of what we punch in for VMZ. Right? Those numbers are typically higher than our timetable speed. So 100, I think, is what we will punch in here. for that. The train number does not go into this, but into this page, Zugwesi, Zug, driver number, and so we have to punch in our train number here. Driver number, where do we find the driver number? How can we calculate the driver number? Obviously not. This is ad lib. You can punch in whatever you want because you don't really have a driver number assigned by DTG. If you want one assigned by me, you can always ask me, but you can also punch in your number, whatever you want. And this concludes this presentation. Super handy and a great thing, in my opinion, that they added this to the game on the 145, the locomotive, the expert locomotive. And now we can go on. Very nice presentation, says Juniper. Thank you very much. I noticed on this track in real life there are also a lot of cargo trains. I could find only a steel factory in Saarbrücken as a destination. I think a lot of trains are actually coming in from France and Spain this way. Theodoros fun times when I used to calculate those manually and use your older presentation to put self-restrictions in game. Yeah, that's the way to do it, and I'm very happy to hear that you used my stuff to calculate it, because this was actually one thing that drew me deeper into this game when we got the first freight cars in Dresden Nahverkehr that were actually able to switch temporary speed restriction between G and P, because the older freight cars can't do this. At least they can't do that in a way that the player sees that it is being done. Annoying thing actually is that we have to go below the 65 for a 70 restriction, but we can release and go back to the 70. Here is the beginning of the temporary speed restriction, and here is the end. Yeah, those weird signs that tell you to close the main circuit breaker twice and not even running you while they are there. We are approaching Hasloch in der Pfalz. The second black trucks too. That city radar loves so much. As I started playing Frankenbahn with 147. The 147 is really a nice loco, isn't it? It's super smooth to drive. I hope at some point they will make a extra version out of it. Oh, you actually like it more than Vectron? That is cool. Well, as always, I like the variety. And to have a great trucks 3 and a great Vectron in the game. It's definitely a nice thing. Blasphemy, says Akku. What you saying about my hero Vectron? Because in the Vectron the POV camera is very far in front, as if you were sitting in a forward lean. Well, that is possible. In 147 is the first person camera just right. Well, the Vectron is a very, very, very elaborate locomotive. William Green did a marvelous job with the Vectron. With the different ways the brake system works, the traction motors switch on and off, and that is really cool. That's a fine piece of work. But I do admit I really enjoy driving the 147. It is, as you would say in German, a Wohlfühl-Lokomotive, a locomotive for just feeling well. Thank you, Hiromaru VT, for the follow. So now we're getting to the junction where you can go to Schifferstadt to the right and straight ahead, or to the left for the high-speed avoider. We don't have to go through Schifferstadt station. Probably we're going through the avoider since we got an L on the ZS2 indicator for the routing. Yes, I'm driving with the right side window down to have a bit more sounds in the cab. Otherwise it would be like this. Now we lock it, and I don't need to shout that much anymore. I have to increase the fan speed though, otherwise it will be too hot in here. Here comes the line from Schifferstadt again. Will the breeze help with the summer Europe is in? No. Breeze always helps. At least for, well, not feeling roasted every time you go out of your house. But there is definitely a difference between the temperatures at the moment with the breeze and the temperatures that we had like 2 or 3 weeks ago, where we had this dome of hot air sitting on top of us. Go down to 100 is not so hard. Is it Stoßlüften when the window is down, or is it Zugluft? Ja. Müssen wir mal aufpassen, dass man keinen Zug erwischt. So, now the signals are slowing us down to 100. We are stopping at Mannheim, that means we're actually going across the bridge. We're not stopping on the big yard at Ludwigshafen first. Let's see where we are stopping. Maybe we're going this attractive ramp. First we go across the 100 kilometer switches. Nice view, but I was scared that I might run into a signal that tells us to slow down even more. But actually we are on high greens. stupid cars, why don't they use the Autobahn? That's true. But it's actually better for how much gas they are using. Those are at the moment zero emission cars. June, must we still lüften when it's warmer outside than inside? Yeah, well. Huh. Did you see the VR0 just switched to a VR1? Less than a second before we approached it. Because of the nuclear power. Yeah. The nuclear power that we have here in our over at Catenary. Oh man. No longer in Germany. No nuclear power here.
Zugbeeinflussung.
Okay, now the same again after the signal. Did you see it switched from a VR0 to an indication of 60? Probably is laminiert that we must still lift. We have to air our rooms as often as possible. So, oh, it was. Did you not announced?
Zugbeeinflussung.
Did he not announce 60? At any rate, at first it was 130, maybe it even improved more. And the next one will be 80. But that means we're not going across this nice ramp. We're going across the more boring way towards Mannheim. On the right side. Now we get the 80 and 70 announced. Running train, Theodoros is asking about running train. I have not tried it yet, but I have looked at it with great interest. And I was tempted to buy it. But then I thought I have so many things to do now. Let's buy it sometimes else, and then I didn't buy it. But I will most probably buy it at any time. Same as Theodorus. Yeah, the colleagues. Cool most. The City Raider. So you played it? This is the cool ramp that I was talking about here. Not the motorway, but this ramp. With some, especially freight trains, you end up in the Ludwigshafen yard and then you come up this ramp and drive noisily over to... What kind of shadows are those? Can you see them? They look like animals. Where are they coming from? Are there any animals? I don't know. What always impressed me on Ludwigshafen Bahnhof was those huge gangways and driveways underneath platforms. Oh, you did not play it?
Zugbeeinflussung. Zugbeeinflussung. Zugbeeinflussung.
So with the 70 we can actually not break free from our PZB indication of 65.
Zugbeeinflussung.
But we're not getting any magnets for it either. Now we are in the 70.
Zugbeeinflussung.
You played back in service. Back in your own service? Ooh. That looks spooky with this train. Okay, we can power through that.
Zugbeeinflussung. Zugbeeinflussung.
Well, it could be. Here we're driving up a steep ramp, so we need a lot of power. For some reason our objective marker thingy came back. Two expert locomotives next to each other. The 101 and the 145. Thank you, Theodorus. And now we're getting our BR0 after all.
Zugbeeinflussung. Zugbeeinflussung.
You have to hold down the acknowledge button a bit longer on this locomotive than on others. $45 for the 500. 30 afterwards.
Türfreigabe. Türfreigabe. Türfreigabe.
And a lot of traffic is happening here, isn't it? Under every stone a 425 is coming out into cities. Türfreigabe, yes. Every time we slow down below the 30, we get the Türfreigabe. That red train is asking for a raise, this Theodore, as well. It's unfair because we're running under caution. But so is the other one, probably. Mannheim. We are already down to shunting speed. It's a long stretch. Definitely more than the 1 kilometer. Vorsignalabstand. You have a lot of Tür. Yeah, that's true. If all the doors on my cars are suddenly allowed to open. Oh, look, a G6 shunter is at the horizon. So the only thing that I'm actually missing is that there are passenger trains pulled by this locomotive. To see if there's special inserts for... Yeah, I was just about to suggest that if it wouldn't be nice to have an automatic bot on Discord that would notify everyone whenever a stream starts. But today I put it out there myself. Yeah, I know AJ has something like this for her streams. And I'm a bit old school with things like this. When things like this are concerned, because I never want to annoy anyone with too many notifications. But you're definitely right, everyone can turn them off if they don't want to get them. Today I just thought I will let you guys know that I finally found the time to make a new presentation, and that we are no longer in the UK for a change and back to Germany. Here we are. Whoops. And so fast we got ausgebootet. Yeah, that was that. He took over. Another thing with those sheets, actually, you can switch between timetables put out in PR and G, but this sometimes confuses things a bit. Doesn't make a big difference here, but different rules for calculating brake percentage apply here. So, interesting. Let's get back to a different train, and let's just hop into a train that is infamously underpowered, and as well as much as the brake percentage is concerned. You might remember when you played the journey mode in Ruhr-Osten, Rhein-Ruhr-Osten. There is one service where you are supposed to pull a rake of tank cars from Hagen via Ennepetal up the ramp, and you just can't do it with the Trax 2. I tried doing it with the 145, and you can't do it either. Let's see if we can find that service. Osten. It is. Is it that one? Something like that one. Looks like it at any rate. And there you can see what this brake sheet looks like if you don't have the required minimum brake percentage. And yeah. Here we have a train with loaded Z cars, tank cars, with some sort of substance, flammable, and then you get those codes that people who come to the rescue if the train relays actually know what's in there, how to put out a fire. What's nice on the expert locomotive that's that the blinds on the rear are actually pulled down so that all the controls don't get destroyed by the sunlight. That is a super nice touch. But coming back to what we were talking about, we see we have Z cars here. They are all loaded. The game puts us into the long loco formation, putting the first 5 into G, the rest in P. Actually, we can check if that is true or if it is only on paper. Put to load, that is good. It is put to P. First one is already put to P. What is bad because we cannot actually change it. Here the artist made a bit of a boo-boo because the lever that does not work distinguishes between B and P. It should be G and P, obviously. And those are the old Z cars that came with Rhein-Ruhr-Osten and that can't switch their brakes. So, the sheet does something plausible, putting the train into a long loco formation, but we cannot do it. You can also see under the Bemerkungen, those cars have parking brake again, and then you can see those numbers that correspond with the numbers on those yellow plates. In a way, 1863. And this 1863 we can also see here in the UN and another marker that you know that there is dangerous stuff. So special load is typically marked in here. If something is broken, if the brake is not working, you would find something here and stuff like this. The area says 301863 would be aviation fuel kerosene. Oh, I did never check this out. But now let's look at our brake sheet. Our Fahrplan tells us we can go 120, yeah, not with this train, but with minimum brake percentage of 105. And if you calculate our brake percentage, it is only 61. So we have 44 missing Bremshundertstel. A brake percentage of 44 is missing in our train. This is something where we have to call not the signaler but the Betriebsleitung, the supervisor, and ask what we are supposed to do, and the dispatcher tells us, well, just proceed as signals indicate. Thank you very much. Then we have our next kerosene disaster in Nepal, because we will never be able to slow down this train on a downhill run if we go with 120 down the hill with this train and with missing 44 Bremshund. That's impossible. Then, because the timetable speed is 120 and our loaded seconds cannot go faster than 100, our tank cars are limited to 100. How do we know that? Because it says so on the cars. Let's go on the other side. There is more sun. We would look for something that looks like this. This is the Lastgrenzenraster, and it tells us up to what load this car can go, what speed on what quality of track. So S is always short for schnell, quick, what translates to 100. What used to be quick and fast when those abbreviations were coined. So S equals 100 and 120 will equal SS for sehr schnell, very fast. That is typically the two speeds that the cars are coined for. Track quality is a bit like the track availability rating in the UK. How much axle load can the track stomach? And D is the best and A is the worst. And most of the tracks that we have in Train Sim World 6 are D quality tracks or even better. And then we can see our car here on a D track can run 100 kilometers per hour up to a load of 67.4 tons. 120, this car can only go when it is empty, 0, regardless of what track quality. And it does not have any stars behind here that can actually lift the maximum authorized speed of cars beyond that grid here. This is why here in this sheet we have marked yes. In our consist we have vehicles that cannot go the 120 timetable speed, but they are limited to 100. Another reason to call the old man. So 2 asterisks. We have to call the old man, the Betriebsstellenleitung, and ask what the fuck we are supposed to do with our train, right? And then they send us running. And we have marked here, im Wagenzug sind Fahrzeuge mit gefährlichen Gütern, with dangerous cargo. Yes, our kerosene is dangerous cargo. This is why it is marked. Go 100, no brake. Says yes. Well, if we go, the good thing is we won't make it up the incline towards Ennepetal. You can try. Maybe you can do it. I was not able. I ran the same service with a Vectron. The Vectron got it up the hill. So the Vectron actually is probably the most powerful locomotive here for those services. Single locomotive. Maybe the Eurosprinter can do it too. I don't know. Maybe the Taurus or the Eurosprinter Dispolog or 2 of them actually get the rake up, but not this, not the Trax 2 that typically came with this DLC at the time. Here, look, this is the old time of day system where the signals have this immense shine to them. But they definitely are easier to see in those old DLCs. 750. Yeah. Well, yes. With the Vectron, I managed to play the service. With the other locomotives, they just stalled on the hill. And if you look at those values, then you're not surprised, because we never can slow down those vehicles. The problem with the tank cars is typically that they don't have this automatic load change like with the auto-wreck cars and with other vehicles that adjust the brake weight to the load of cargo. Those wagons can only switch between loaded state and unloaded state, between 26 tons of brake percentage and 58 tons of brake percentage, switching at a mass of 48 tons. And if you have more cargo into them than the 58 tons, then the brake percentage drops below the 100. And if we look how much cargo we have in here, we have 67 load of cargo. That is actually putting our car to a mass of 90 tons per car. That is exactly or almost the limit that we can go on 100 kilometers per hour. So they are full to the brim, and our mass is with 67 way below the 58 that we get in brake percentage. All right. I think that was enough for today. Almost 2 hours. That is always the nicest time that we can achieve with our stream. There are a lot of other routes to explore where we can run the Baureihe 145 Expert. Again, it was a bit sad that we did not have more time for this beautiful locomotive to celebrate it, because there were so many other DLCs yanked out in March, I think it was. And so we dropped a bit underneath the Czech route that was so gorgeous. And yeah, we have not even looked at the angle cocks for shunting and all that stuff properly. So I will have to return to this loco more often, because it is really great. Also no RFB in fully loaded set cars, if I'm not mistaken. That can probably be so, yeah. But I cannot remember. I don't remember if I have ever read this in writing in a directive, or whether this is just best practice. I guess this is at least best practice not to use AFB on fully loaded set cars, because the AFB probably cannot handle situations where your brake percentage is so much below the weight of your cars. Very nice evening, says Juniper. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys, for staying with me and enduring another presentation with a lot of numbers and how to read those sheets. I hope now you can appreciate those sheets and don't get lost in those numbers and the German captions on those forms. Akora, is there now a pause to British stuff? I can handle that. I can come plenty handle that. I don't know yet. I will play whatever comes to my mind. I will also go to American stuff again. Then, not so far away in the future, we'll have some Japanese stuff to play. I also want to go back to the Czech stuff. Maybe not so much British stuff as there was in the past weeks. But when the Thames Valley lines release, I will have to do UK stuff again. And with pleasure, I will. A lot of interesting things that I read about the Thames Valley in the last roadmap article. So, will be interesting if everything lives up to what is promised for next DLC that is supposed to be released according to my calendar is the Cargo Line 6 for Germany. For this line, Pfälzische Ludwigsbahn especially, with tank cars, a different kind of set cars. No Zackens, but trucks or whatever they are called, with gas in it. So maybe I have to check when the embargo ends, but I think it ends sometime tomorrow in the morning. So probably I will be back with it with a unboxing stream, or in a it's a sneak peek stream then, if it is before the release, and then we can look at that together. Maybe using the 145 again and see what our brake sheets tell us about those cars. Thank you very much, guys. Have the greatest of weeks. Be nice to each other and enjoy your life. Bye bye.